Welcome to Jargonomics, the show where we cut through some of the web industry jargon, giving simple explanations that are hopefully easy to understand. In this episode, domain names. We use domain names every day on the internet, and frankly, life online would be much harder without them. But what are they? How do they work? And should you have one? A simple way to describe a domain name is that it's an easy to remember word that can help us to connect to our favorite websites and send emails. It would be much harder to visit these websites or send emails if we had to remember long, complicated strings of letters and numbers. Now, every computer that's connected to the internet is assigned a unique number or a long string of letters and numbers, and this is called an IP address. So to make things easier, we can register a memorable domain name and point it at this unique address. Now this is achieved by means of domain name servers, or DNS. Now, you can think of DNS like a phone book. You look up a name and you find the number. Domain names and DNS work in a similar way. Now of course, IP addresses and DNS are big topics on their own, so we'll cover those in future videos. Thinking about registering domain names, you need to consider the extension that you're going to buy. And at the top level, the most popular are .com, .org and .net. And each of these extensions has a meaning. .com stands for commercial, .org is normally used by non-profit organizations, and .net is normally reserved for network services. You have to go all the way back to March 1985 to find the very first domain name that was registered. And since that time, millions upon millions of domain names have been registered. So it may prove difficult for you to find the name that you want with one of those most popular extensions like .com. But don't worry, there are plenty more to choose from. First, it might help to understand how a domain name is formatted. You can think of it a bit like the folder hierarchy on your computer, except with a domain name you read from right to left. And the full stop or period character is used to divide the different parts of the domain name. So the first part of the domain name is on the right hand side, and that's called the top level domain, or TLD. The next part along is the second level domain. So if we take the example of the domain google.com, com is the top level and Google is the second level. Now there are many top level domains that are associated with specific countries. For example, in the UK, we use the .uk top level domain. Management of these country-specific domains is delegated to a local registry, and in the UK, that's an organisation called Nominet. The most common UK domain extensions are .co.uk and .org.uk. And again, co stands for commercial, org is typically used by non-profit organisations. So if we take the example of the domain google.co.uk, reading from right to left, UK is the top level domain, co is the second level domain, and Google is the third level domain. So localized domains like .co.uk can be a good choice if your business is based in the UK, of course. So do you need a domain name? Well, if you're in business, then yes, you do. Trying to run your website using some subdomain that belongs to somebody else's domain, well, that's never going to inspire confidence in your customers, and it might not be very easy for them to remember. And likewise, if you've got an email address on your internet service provider's domain, it just doesn't look as professional as having your own company domain name. Not only that, it might lock you into that service provider, because if you change providers in the future, you may lose access to that email address. Registering a domain name is not expensive, so there's really no reason not to do it. So we've looked at what domains are, we've looked at how they're structured and how they work, and we've considered whether or not you should have one. But that begs the question, what's involved in buying a domain? Most people buy their domain names from an agent or intermediary, and this agent or intermediary deals with all of the different registrars on your behalf. And that's great if you're registering multiple domains of different types, since you're going to have just one contact and billing point for all of them. The intermediary makes their money by marking up the wholesale fees from the registrars. Now, this doesn't mean that it's cheaper to buy direct. In fact, that's often not possible. And even when it is, in many cases, it's still cheaper to buy through an intermediary than directly from the registrar. And of course, it's way more convenient. Now I say buy, but really it's more like leasing a domain name, since you have to pay an annual or a biannual fee to keep the name. And if you stop paying the fee, well, you lose the domain name. Be careful too not to confuse your domain name renewal fees with other web service fees, things like hosting or email provision. These are different services and you'll often have different providers for each of these. It may be better to consider having your own account with an intermediary so that you're always in control of the domains that you buy. And if you're using a web design agency, they should be happy to help you register and manage the domains under your own account. Now just bear in mind though, if it's your account, you're responsible for keeping billing details up to date and paying those renewal fees. And if you forget to update expired credit card details, you may lose your domain name as a result. Some web agencies will pay these fees for you on your behalf and then bill them on to you. Naturally, there'll be a markup on the fees and it's going to cost you more, but you might prefer that peace of mind that comes from knowing that your domain names will always be renewed. Just make sure you read that small print, because if you part company with that agency in the future, you'll want to retain control of your domain names. A final word of caution. Don't fall into the trap of registering every available domain name extension. Even small fees add up quickly, and you can end up spending a fortune on annual domain renewals for little or no extra benefit. Well, that's all for this episode of Jargonomics. Please hit the thumbs up button if you like this video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and join us next time as we decode more web industry jargon.